Nah, not those Lions. 3 Lions we can get behind.
And he hoofed it.
There's more pressure being ratcheted up with a loss like that, of course.
Just getting the head boxed off you, that just kind of happened.
For all your Lions coverage this summer, download the OTB Sports app.
The OTB Podcast Network with Get Set Go. Car insurance is boring, but saving money bounces it into brilliance. Enter promo code SPORT and save €40 off your car insurance with getsetgo.ie.
GAA on Off the Ball.
You're welcome, Max. So we're just about to go full-time in Copenhagen. Croatia 3, Spain 5 is the latest in extra time. On the GAA front, we'll get to football in a second. Just if you missed the news, Richie announced it there in the news round. The GAA confirmed 8,000 fans will be in Croke Park on Saturday. Leinster hurling semi-final day, Galway against Dublin and Kilkenny against Wexford. It's a double header, so that's a big old jump from 200 fans. There were apparently discussions today at central GAA level, and the GAA said there'll be ticketing details confirmed tomorrow. I've no idea if that will involve antigen testing or showing you have a vaccine, or if it's just a total free-for-all. But regardless, 8,000 fans in Croke Park at the weekend will be nice to see. Now, very happy to say, we're talking football. We have Paddy Andrews with us, All-Ireland winner with Dublin, but of course more famous for being part of the football pod with Paddy and Andy, with Tommy Rooney asking the questions. Hiya Paddy, how you doing?
Evening, Joe. How are you?
Very well. Do people stop you in the street now and say, are you Paddy from the football pod with Paddy and Andy? Is that how things go for you these days?
It's gas. 13 years I played with Dublin and no one ever said anything to me, but a couple of weeks with Tommy and Andy, and I just can't walk down the street anymore. It's incredible.
I can imagine. Do you know Tommy Rooney, they say?
Yeah. What's he like in real life?
Well, on that theme of what's he like in real life, to a point, Keane O'Sullivan, before we get into the weekend's action, announced his retirement. So 8 All-Irelands he sails off into the sunset with. He said he would love to have continued, but just reoccurring injuries means he's calling it a day. So O'Sullivan, very interesting in that he ran the full gambit. He made his debut in, of all games, the startled earwigs game against Kerry, and then, I mean, by the end was about the most accomplished looking sweeper I think we've seen, and it's been a hell of a career. Tell us a bit about Keane O'Sullivan.
Yeah, I think initially when I heard the news, I would have spoke with Keane probably at the start of the year when I was making my own decision that I was stepping away, and I know he was kind of torn between going back and not. And I think it's always a sad day when a player has to retire and it's not completely on their own terms. A sad day for Keane, obviously for his teammates and for the Dublin supporters, but it's funny, I was looking through his list of accomplishments on Twitter yesterday, and the 8 All-Irelands, the All-Stars, All-Ireland club titles, the success he had, not just with Dublin but with Kilmacud Crokes. And I think it says it all about him as a man and what he was like as a teammate, that despite all of that, he was still unbelievably hungry and unbelievably driven to get back out and give it one more go. Like, he easily could have left, and there was probably 6 or 7 of us after the 5 in a row in particular where it felt like a culmination of things, but guys hung on. And for Keane, he's had a bit of bad luck, obviously, with injuries and things like that. And probably throughout his whole career, his hamstrings were always kind of touch and go. But the last couple of years, he was still going to prehabbing with the physios, doing all the extra things you need to do when you become an older player and your body starts to creak. He was still so driven and dedicated to do all of those things, with just the hope of going back out for one more go at it and representing Dublin and playing with his teammates again. And when you've seen the success he had, and that was still his mentality, I think that says it all about him as a guy, but most important as a teammate as well. He's been such an influential figure over like you say, the development and the evolution of this Dublin team to where they are today. I was playing on the pitch with him that day in 2009. You know, we've seen the bad sides of it and what he's gone on to achieve in his career as so instrumental in the success Dublin have had over the last decade, right up there with guys like Cluxton and James McCarthy for just having a huge influence on the success they've had.
Yeah, he was such an intelligent presence, you would say, when he was playing sweeper. Teams invariably dropped a man back and he was the free man, and he just played that role with aplomb. It looked far too easy at times to be true. So intelligence, I suspect, is something he had on the pitch and probably brought to proceedings off the pitch as well. When you say influential off the pitch, what kind of things? Would he be a vociferous type or just lead by example type?
No, he had incredible leadership right from his underage days. Like I say, he's a very intelligent guy off the pitch as well. But particularly when Dublin started to change our style of play after we obviously had great success in Jim Gavin's first year in 2013, and was probably quite a cavalier approach to our play, and it was all out attack. We obviously, the Donegal defeat in 2014 is well documented, and the impact that had on our team and our style of play. And he was right at the forefront, along with the coaches, in terms of, okay, what is our defensive structure going to be? How are we going to adapt to playing against these teams? And how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? And with that role, the sweeper role, generally you can go one or two ways. You can have a guy who's a really, really intelligent player, but may not have the physical attributes to really excel at that role. Or you could have the flip side, where a guy's really fast, he's really athletic, but he doesn't have the positional sense and the nous to play it. The beauty of Keane is that he had both. He was an incredible athlete, despite injury trouble, from his minor days, the whole way through with Kilmacud Crokes to becoming a mainstay in the Dublin team. He always had the speed, the agility to get around the pitch, and you couple that with his intelligence and his positional sense. He just read the game, and to have both of those things, that's why he was so effective. That's why he was such a leader on the Dublin team. And we became certainly a lot more probably solid and a lot more rigid in how we played, but teams just couldn't break us down. And between himself, Cluxton obviously kind of directing things from a goal, Rory O'Carroll initially in the full back line, but Keane manning that half forward line and just protecting us from conceding goals. We always felt we'd have the forwards that could outscore teams, and he was just a comfort blanket there. And at his best, there was no one better at it, Joe.
Yeah, no, it was a great formula. To the weekend that was, Paddy, and there are a few notable exceptions to the point I'm about to make. In particular, Offaly and Louth played out a bit of a thriller and went to extra time, and we might touch on John Mon and the career he's had before we wrap up. But those few exceptions aside, it was a weekend full of mismatches. So Donegal down 225 to 112, so a 16-point win for Donegal. Mayo against Sligo was 323 to 12 points, so a 20-point win for Mayo. And even Clare, who've had a very decent Division 2 season against Kerry, it was 322 to 111, so a 17-point win. So kind of 16 to 20-point wins there. And the usual early summer rumination, I think, about provincial championships are just a waste of time, and 31 team open draw, waste of time. Cavan and Tipperary, obviously exceptional stories last year, but I think we're firmly looking at the various bits and bobs in the media over the last couple of days. I think we're pretty firmly back to this structure. This championship just is no longer fit for purpose. It probably hasn't been for a long time, but people are really sick of it now, I think, is the very clear point.
I do think it's getting to the stage where people are essentially just fed up with how the games are panning out. I mean, with the shortened season, obviously the impact that COVID has had, not just this season, but last season as well, obviously, people are looking forward to the championship kicking off. And that was the opening weekend, and it was so flat. As players, from our own point of view, we love the National League because the games were every week. You're playing 7 or 8 games, and you're playing, like for us in Division 1, every game was really competitive. We were going to play Mayo, we were playing Kerry. That's what appeals to the players. That's what appeals to supporters, to the media. You flip on to the provincial championships, and like, as bad as the weekend was, it's probably going to be the same for the next couple of weeks. I mean, Dublin play Wexford this weekend. Kerry's next game is going to be against Tipperary, although of course last year was a bit of an anomaly, but I'd be surprised if there was any sort of competition in that game as well. And it's just, people are looking for more than that, supporters, but also I think for the players, Joe. I mean, whatever about this season as well, if you're a Sligo player there, or like a Clare player who's had a relatively successful season, and then you realise you draw Kerry in the first round of the championship and there's no back door, these teams don't have a game for another 7 or 8 months. So for GAA players, for their own supporters, and just as a product for the media, the provincial championships, like I say, it's probably been on this track for the last best part of a decade. It's just not serving up. It's not suiting anyone, any of the parties involved. And like I say, for the next couple of weeks again, I can't really see much difference either. Yeah.
And like, look, to be fair, the knockout situation exacerbates things. But even regardless, you know, you make an interesting point there that we now have a shorter inter-county season and will going forward to give the club player a bit more time. So just like, you think the floating voter who's got the Euros or the Lions or got hurling or got any other number of sports to choose from, you know, we've got a shorter window than ever to really catch people who want to watch the inter-county game. And like, you know, if a casual fan turned around to you and said, really, when do I need to start watching this? I mean, you could turn around and say, like at a push, maybe you want to watch Tyrone Donegal, but frankly, just hang around till Dublin Kerry, basically watch the two semis and the final, and you're not going to miss a whole lot, really, you know. But besides maybe your own county having a good day out or something like that, and you know, like the GA kind of want to be careful here with how many summers of that they want to offer up to people.
But you're right. If you look at what was the most exciting games in the weekend, it's teams that are competitive against each other. Louth and Offaly was a brilliant game. Okay, it mightn't be as high quality as watching a Dublin or Kerry match, but at least it was a really exciting game. It goes down to the death. The reason behind it is those teams are evenly matched. That has to be the base. That if you're looking as a product for Gaelic football, and you're right, the Euros are on. Like I myself, like I've played GAA for my whole life. I would rather watch a European Championship game than say the Mayo and Sligo game at the weekend, because you just know it's not going to be. There's no peril, there's no jeopardy in it. You know the result before it happens. And like say, how many games you can probably count on one hand in the provincial series. Roscommon and Galway this weekend will be one. Potentially, yes, Derry and Donegal in a couple of weeks' time. Derry have a bit of momentum. And then maybe Cork and Kerry in the Munster, although I'd still say Kerry would win that pretty convincingly as well. And you're right, you've got a 3-month window where we're playing this championship off in competition with loads of other sports. And if you're a young guy, particularly a young kid in Dublin where soccer and rugby is so prevalent, and hurling as well, you know, when is Dublin's most biggest game going to be? Potentially an All-Ireland semi-final against Mayo or Galway. The GAA do really, and to be fair, I think they are. I think it's so obvious now that it does demand action. And it's no secret, Joe, from the players and from the supporters and the media. The national leagues, they are the most interesting, they're the most enjoyable. It's week on week, it's great games. It's Dublin travelling down to Tralee to play Kerry. It just captures the imagination because it's competitive. Teams are playing against teams that you couldn't call who's going to win. The championship, it just does not have that in the provincial system at the minute.
No, it doesn't. And I think you, as in Dublin and Mayo in particular, served up such amazing finals, and you know the drawn year as well. It just left a lovely aftertaste, and you kind of maybe thought, okay, things aren't so bad. But weekends like this, it doesn't quite feel like that. So Donegal were live on TV. Kerry obviously dismantled Clare, and Mayo had. Sligo, Aidan O'Shea looked very trim, very fit, scored 2-2. Sean O'Shea scored rake a goal and 7 points I think for Kerry. They were lethal off turnover ball. Donegal, I mean, I'll get your thoughts on Kerry in a sec. On Donegal, I was really looking forward to seeing them against Dublin in the league semi-final, and frankly it was like insipid. It was so insipid. I thought, are they just holding their cards? Are they actually just not giving anything away here, or is this where they are? And then after last year with the slip up in Ulster, I don't quite trust them. I know they look like a really good team. So where are you on Donegal? How much faith have you in them this year?
I think they'll win the Ulster Championship, and we were actually in the same boat as Dublin players. We were waiting and presuming we'd play Donegal last year in the All-Ireland semi-final. Like Declan Bonner has come in there. I think this is his 4th year in charge now. It was a big change for Donegal from the Jim McGuinness and then the Rory Gallagher era, which was a very defined and set way of playing. Declan Bonner came in and was trying to change that, and that takes time to kind of change that style of play and be a lot more on the front foot. And they brought players through like Michael Langan and Thompson and these guys up front to supplement McBrearty and Michael Murphy. So it was going to take them time to really settle into Declan Bonner's style of play. But you're right. I would have had them as the best team in Ulster for the last 2 or 3 years, but they've had silly slip-ups which have cost them. I wouldn't read into that National League semi-final at all. Right. That was another thing the GAA probably got wrong, like to not have a league final, and the scheduling of it as well. Donegal, by the time that game threw in Breffni Park, we knew the Kerry had hammered Tyrone. There wasn't going to be league final. Donegal were playing championship 2 weeks later, so they weren't going to risk anything. So it wasn't a true reflection of where they're at all. But you're right. Do you trust them enough, particularly if Michael Murphy, like that was just seemed like such an unnecessary risk to play him in a game they were always going to beat down. But to be honest, I'd still have them as the top team in Ulster. That gets them a prize of playing against more likely Kerry in an All-Ireland semi-final. Do I trust them to go all the way and to an All-Ireland final and potentially beat Dublin. I think they're probably a little bit short at the back, and I think that could hurt them. Everything would need to go their way, and look, no more so than Cillian O'Connor as it being a miss for Mayo. If Michael Murphy's not playing for Donegal, they're just not going to get to where they need. They might even win the Ulster Championship, never mind be competing for the All-Ireland. But if he's back and he's fit, I'd still have them as a top team, particularly with Tyrone's struggles and their kind of identity crisis with their new coaches. I think they get a big game against Derry in a couple of weeks' time. Derry are bringing huge form from the National League, but it's the type of game you're saying there, Joe. You don't trust them. They could slip up, but I'd be surprised. That I do think Donegal will win the Ulster Championship despite all of that.
Mayo and Kerry, I mentioned, they scored 3-23 and 3-22 respectively, and that's a Cillian O'Connor list. Mayo as well. So I hate the question, what do you learn from a certain game, but what do you take, if anything, from those heavy scorelines? I mean, we kind of know they're both very good teams.
I wouldn't take much from it. It's very difficult to read, and particularly the Sligo Mayo game was such a mismatch. Sligo were physically, just athletically, completely and utterly overrun. The biggest thing, I suppose, and the only sort of learning with Cillian O'Connor missing, and we don't know for certain with the condensed schedule, it's got to be a big ask for him to come back from that injury. I seen he was in a boot. We hope he does, and particularly Mayo do. They will need him if they're going to get to where they're going to need, where they want to get to. But what we've seen is that Aidan O'Shea is going to have to take on the scoring burden. It kind of robs them around the middle of the field. They've got Conor Loftus and Matty Ruane, who had a really good league, but look, Mayo would love to have Aidan O'Shea out there and inside, but without Cillian O'Connor, he's going to have to take on the scoring burden. He's going to be a handful for any team. You can see, despite scoring 2-2, I think his link-up play, he's very unselfish as a player, probably to a detriment, particularly if he's going to take on the scoring burden. He probably does need to start pulling the trigger a bit more himself, but he brings guys like Tommy Conroy into it. That was the big learning, that you can see the way Mayo are going to have to try and go about winning the Connacht Championship and competing to win the All-Ireland. Aidan O'Shea is going to be their main man on the edge of the square. But I think ultimately it's such a blow for them. Like James Horan and Lee Keegan, these guys, Aidan O'Shea himself, Kevin McLaughlin, a Connacht Championship is not going to suffice for them. No. If they win that, it's not going to suffice for their supporters. It's not for the players, not for James Horan. They are only interested in winning the All-Ireland. And I just think the blow of losing Cillian O'Connor, not just for the scores, I can't see them competing without him, unfortunately.
So with your blue tinted glasses, is it really Kerry you're looking at and worried about? That's what we're down to here.
I think they've been the most impressive team, and last year was such a blip and such a I know Peter King got such a hard time. Like, Kerry at their best play to their strengths. Kerry's strengths are always their attacking players, getting 6 scoring forwards up the pitch. And the biggest thing I said on the pod initially before the National League, what were Kerry looking to get out of the National League and coming through the Munster Championship? They needed to get away from being overly reliant on the genius of David Clifford. And last year, the game against Cork, there was no attacking game plan whatsoever. It was kicking into Clifford, and he's that good. He might be able to beat 4 fellas and kick it over his shoulder. And he can do that. Yeah. But that's not a game plan. You're not going to have consistent success, and you're certainly not going to win the All-Ireland to beat Dublin like that. That has been the most impressive thing. They're 6 forwards, and as much as the headlines that Sean O'Shea was brilliant at the weekend, Clifford was actually a little bit quieter, but those 2 guys are going to be to the fore. I think Paddy Clifford and Darragh Moynihan have had a huge impact. The work they do and the hard runs and the league play that they do, it allows the marquee forwards, and particularly Paul Geaney as well, it's just much more cohesive. It's a far better unit, and the chemistry they have up front, I mean, they tore Tyrone to shreds, they tore Clare to shreds, and they'll do that all the way through to the All-Ireland semi-final, more likely against Donegal. But they are, without a doubt, they're the team that, if you were in Dublin's perspective, and look, we probably knew that at the start of the year. There's nothing really new there. Unfortunately, we're trying to sell it, but they are most certainly our team.
I know, it kind of goes back to that initial conversation we're having. We could kind of fast forward through a few bits here. Before you go, just to mention, John Maughan. So he's gone in, I think it's his third year with Offaly now, and they beat Louth in extra time. And this was after electing to play the Division 3 final against Derry, where they lost by 12 points just last week, and that would have been a tough loss to come back from. They played Louth, who had opted not to play the Division 4 final against Antrim. Just on Maughan, I mean, and Niall McNamee as well, by the way, scored 1-3 in his 86 minutes as a 35-year-old. I mean, you want to get off your backside and start doing something again here. But, like, you think Maughan, you think Clare in 1992, and here we are in 2021. This guy's a bit of a legend, really.
It's phenomenal. It is absolutely. And McNamee is a player, and Maughan, like, the time, okay, they may not have had huge success and over the years, particularly in his later career, but the time and sacrifice he puts in is every bit as much as what Peter Keane is doing with Kerry or Desi Farrell or Jim Gavin were doing with Dublin, and you mightn't just get the credit for it. The time it takes to run a senior inter-county team, the travelling, the coaching, dealing with 35, 40 players, and have the passion and the energy to do it. And he still looks as fit. He was always very fit.
Listen, the legs were always out, Paddy.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. He did year-round tan, the whole 9 yards. But what he's done with Offaly, and it's brilliant to see. It is. And you know what? That's the big challenge as well for this year's championship. Offaly had huge momentum. They've got promoted. Same with Mickey Hart with Louth. If they lose that game, then they don't have a game for 7 or 8 months. And that's more a fallacy of this year's championship, that there's no backdoor for these type of things. But for Offaly, it's brilliant to see. They're not going to get huge credit. They don't get huge media coverage. But for them to get promoted, their players, for Maughan himself, to win a Leinster Championship game, and they go down and they play Jack O'Connor's Kildare, and the momentum they'll have. I was worried after they were well beaten by Derry in the Division 3 final. But it's a feel-good story, and like you say, Joe, you're probably looking around the championship for some feel-good stories for counties. And John Maughan and Offaly, it was just brilliant to see a team kind of get the rewards, because they've put in the hard work. You can clearly see that over lockdown, even though they know they're probably not going to win a provincial title. With Dublin looming over. They don't care. They've put in the hard work as players and a coaching team, and they're getting the rewards, and it's brilliant to see that.
They sure are. They've Kildare on Sunday. Listen, Paddy Andrews, All-Ireland winner, friend to Tommy Rooney, of course. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Take care. Bye-bye.
GAA on Off the Ball.
The OTB Podcast Network with Get Set Go. Car insurance is boring, but saving money bounces it into brilliance. Enter promo code SPORT and save €40 off your car insurance with getsetgo.ie.